Good afternoon and welcome everybody. It's great to have you all join us this afternoon. It's great to see so many people joining. Thanks again to everyone for joining and to all our speakers for joining. So first of all, my name is Caroline Sanders. I'm Professor of Medical Sociology at University of Manchester. And much of my research focuses on people's experiences of health and care services. And I also lead on public and community involvement and engagement for the Applied Research Collaboration in Greater Manchester. For those of you who are not familiar with the ARCS, this is a network of 15 NIHR applied research collaborations across the country, which are funded by the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And these are a research service that is really close to the beating heart of health and social care. ARCS conduct research to investigate how best to deliver services to meet the needs of diverse populations, and there's a strong emphasis on addressing health inequalities and working in partnership with service providers, decision makers and local communities. For more information and to find your local ARC, you can see the NIHR ARCS website, and we'll put some links in the chat. You can also follow us on X and Blue Sky as well. So we'll be putting some links in the chat. This webinar is part of the annual NIHR ARCS National webinar series for 2025. And this year's series, we're exploring the healing power of creative arts. And here in the second webinar of the series, we'll be hearing from researchers on exploring lived experience with creative arts. So really exciting presentations we've got in store for you today. Thank you to all our speakers for joining us this afternoon, who I'll introduce shortly. So you can see on the screen, we have 3 short 10-minute presentations on projects that have used creative arts, such as poetry, theatre and illustration, to explore lived experiences of children in temporary accommodation, pregnant women in prisons, and gypsy and traveller women. So really exciting webinar in store. So without further delay, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Professor Monica Lacan-Paul, and she's talking about trauma-informed song, poetry, photography and theatre to reach families living in temporary accommodation. Monica is Professor of Integrated Community Child Health at UCL, Great Ormond Street, Institute of Child Health, and Honorary Consultant Paediatrician at Whittington Health NHS Trust. And her research has focused on using participatory methods to co-create interventions with and for the most underserved children in society, with a particular emphasis on the links between health, education and environment. And she's leading 2 ARC North Thames research projects focused on children in temporary accommodation and co-designing a culturally sensitive parenting support programme for refugee and asylum-seeking parents in the UK. She'll be telling us more about this work in her presentation. So over to you, Monica. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Just share my slides first. Great. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for this invite to really share our experiences of a number of different projects that we've been working on where we adopt the creative arts. We have over many years now realized that actually by being proactive in our research, we are at danger of re-traumatizing sometimes our participants. And by using qualitative methods where sometimes the families or the children and parents haven't really been prepared and had a relationship that has been built up with us, that can actually mean that they're having to share stories without any pre-preparation at all. And it's for this reason that we considered how we wanted to modify the way that we did our studies and changed our approach to them. So I'm just really going to give you a little bit of a journey and a little bit of a taster of a few of the projects that we've done. It's really 2 projects, but different bits of the arts that we've actually made, we've been involved with and how we've utilized them. And then, of course, you're always welcome to contact me and we can go into more detail at another time. But as we say, trauma itself can have long-lasting adverse impact on children and their families. And we don't intentionally try to traumatize our participants, but we can do without realizing this. And it's our duty, we feel, to really take on board the fact that we need to minimize harm and we need to promote well-being. And the arts enable us to provide a safe space, really, where people can meet the researchers, build that trustworthiness. They then have a choice of how they participate, so they're in more control about what they do. They can see the collaboration with other participants as well and what's happening around them. And we can be culturally sensitive in how we then use the arts in different ways. Now, this is just a table which will show you some of the differences, really, between traditional interviews and theatre-based research. And I'm just focusing on theatre here. As I said, I'll mention some of the others as well. But just to pick out a few things here, the power dynamics I talk about a lot, where if you're in a space where you're with the arts, we ourselves are put in a position where we may feel uncomfortable, and therefore we're all on a similar learning curve with each other. The hierarchy changes a little bit. People can then, it can be therapeutic, people can share their stories, but they're in control of sharing that. And it's less extractive, and we can use different languages, cultures, visual methods, so it's more inclusive also. So what we've done is we've used different arts, as I've said. We've used painting, sculpture, photography, and here's an array of what you could consider that you might want to do. And there's different pros and cons. So, for example, some of the children preferred just drawing. They didn't really want to take part in the theatre because it made them feel uncomfortable. The refugee and asylum-seeking mothers that we work with initially didn't want to take part in the arts, but actually as the workshops continued, they became more comfortable with working with each other and building that relationship with each other. And we even use ceramics. So some of the children with neurodiversity have said to us, when they're touching and feeling something, they actually feel that then they're distracted from the conversation that we're having with them, and they feel that, again, they can converse with us in a better way than if we're just looking at them and asking them for some answers. So it's important to think about who is actually working with you when you're thinking of using the arts, which expert from the creative arts is working with you, and it's a team approach. It's really important to think of this as a trust building and relationship approach, and to then think of it as, how are you going to take some of this work and performances, and what will you do with them? So our families were very clear that they were creating maybe some ceramics, or they were creating some pictures, but they didn't just want it to be left. They wanted it to be usable, and therefore we've taken those through to exhibitions and to advocacy programs as well. So this is the project that we've been talking about, which really builds on previous work that we've done over the years. One was the NEON project, which was with the previous ARC, Nurture Early for Optimal Nutrition, and then the Champions project as well, which has been all about working with children under 5 in temporary accommodation. And this has moved on now to the PSP refugees. So there's a story that continues. And as we've gone through the years, we've actually learned a lot about the different ways that we can improve how we use culturally appropriate techniques and different types of arts to do this. Here are some pictures we wanted to just show you. Now, the mothers did not want to show their face, and I think that's really important. It's our duty to respect them. It's our duty to respect how they want to participate. And so what they did here was they made masks, and they, of course, knew each other. And in the previous workshops, they didn't use their masks at all, and they built their collaboration and connection with each other. But they then did a very, very small performance for people they felt comfortable with, because they wanted to share what they had been doing. And through that, they then initially wore their masks, and we've got a short documentary that we can share with you in the future. But these quotes, as you can see here, I won't read them all, actually show you the value of what we were doing. So there was cooperation between mums. They felt as though they were good. They could think about good things and not just about the bad memories. And actually an unintended consequence of this was that they actually started talking about things that were not part of the research project. So, you know, some things that they wanted to take back to the charity organisation, who then put on other workshops for them because of issues that they had raised through this research project. And then just moving on to another project, the Champions that I mentioned, this was with children and families as well, living in temporary accommodation. And you can see the trajectory of what we did here. We created a song through the words of the families. We had a Zine as well, that was a physical Zine that people could look through. We had a theatre production where we had a panel discussion based on the stories that people had told us. And through that panel discussion, we actually took some recommendations to the All Parliamentary Group and actually implemented change in some of the guidance. and then the British Science Festival as well, where people could come collectively to see what we had done. So this is just an array of things that we can see. We have all of these online. So we had a song, as I said, that was put together by the words of the children and mothers. We had that wonderful play, which was just two actors who collated all the stories together. And we even have a mural at De Montfort University, which we hope in the future other people may adopt and want to actually share on walls in their own cities as well. And this has been taken internationally now to Australia, and we're trying to collaborate with them on the Adelaide Fringe Festival next year. Now, just to finish off in the last couple of minutes, the Sprocket project that we're currently working on, ARC supported this project, and we used it in a different way. So we did, yes, we had a number of workshops using the arts, and we had an artist working with us to work with children with disabilities, enabling them to participate in the work that we were doing through creative approaches. However, we also worked with the families using storyboarding, and they used their stories to feed into animations. And so they were able to share their stories and voices in a different way through this animation. I hope you can hear this now.
I'd go to care planning meetings and they'd see all my papers and say, "You look ready for a fight." I think they'd label me an angry mum, which made it easier to tell me they can't help because someone else should be, even though I've just come from them and we've been going back and forth for 5 years. It makes it easier to send me home, and once I'm out the room, to forget who I am. But honestly, why is it a fight? If you are thinking about me, you're not thinking about my daughter, and I'm too exhausted to fight. I'm not an angry mum. I'm just a parent. But I've done the reading, and I know what she's entitled to. So shouldn't someone be helping me with those things so that I can concentrate on her? Eventually I broke down. I said, I don't care what you can't do. It's not about what I want. It's about what she needs. So just tell me what you can do for her.
So thank you very much for listening to me. That's only one animation. We have numerous of these animations and we'll be developing more in the future. But as you can see, embedding the arts in research, advocacy and communication is core to everything we do. We've had a history of storytelling for centuries and centuries, and it works extremely well as an inclusive research approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. And that was an excellent presentation, and I think really conveyed the value of arts in terms of supporting people to tell their stories, etc., in that very honest way, and tapping into emotion and all those experiences. One of the things I should have said at the start, which I apologize I didn't, was that please do feel free to post questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we can take 1 or 2 questions as we go through between speakers, and you can also post questions for the end. So at the moment I can't see any questions in the box at this point, but I wonder if I could just start with a question, Monica. I was interested in what you said about the therapeutic nature of arts, and particularly arts as a way of mitigating trauma, etc. And I wondered how you went about getting feedback on that process itself, and what participants in this said. If you could say a little bit more about that, that would be great.
So we had an iterative process through the whole. So we had a number of workshops basically that led up to the final play that we did. And at the end of each of those workshops, we did feedback sessions. And we did this in 2 ways. Our researcher was embedded within the workshops themselves, so she could actually talk to them and be there to hear from them. And also, they also were able to approach me directly as well, so that if there was anything they wanted to share separately, they were able to do that. And just to say, we actually also had a counsellor, and we provided a counsellor as well, so that if through this emotions they did want to tackle any issues, they were able to actually talk to a counsellor as well. But we have actually formally taken feedback for them that we will be publishing in a paper as well.
That sounds excellent. Thanks so much. And I think it's really important for people to hear some of that as well, maybe able to learn from your experiences. There are 1 or 2 questions in the chat. I'll just ask you one of these. So Sam Carberry is asking, what would you recommend for anyone looking to engage communities via the arts to learn more about their experiences of health and well-being? So top recommendations.
Yes, top recommendations are, 1, work with experts who've done this before. Often people think there's a manual that you can follow and you can't. Number 2 is actually based on very much on your skill set. So you have to identify people who actually have had experience of working with individuals and communities before, and work in partnership with them. And so it's really a team approach, I think. And the other is, as I've said, this you need this constant reflection, reiteration, and you need a flexible approach. I always say this is what I call messy research. It's not a randomized controlled trial. Things change, things don't work out. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to change things, and you've got to be comfortable with that world that you're living in. And finally, ensure that when you ask for funding for this, the funding is adequate to do this. People think that you should be able to do this on a shoestring. If you want to do it properly and respectfully, it's got to be fully resourced. It's got to be fully supported.
Great. And just 1 more quick question. There's a really good question. You talked about people engaging in different ways with different types of creative arts, and somebody has asked, have you got any tips for engaging participants in creative methods for self-expression who claim they are not creative people?
And that's exactly right. That's why some people we offered different ranges for different people. So we had, in one of our projects, we had a whole room, and actually people found their own spaces, and some of them some of them just wanted to throw paper planes. That's all they wanted to do, but they wrote messages on the paper planes and they threw it. Some of them actually wanted to do a little bit of theatre work and art, and some of them really didn't want to engage in that at all. And then some of them just were using pens and spinning tops, but talking at the same time as they were doing that. So I think we have to be very, very careful that we're not imposing an approach that we think is really good, and actually the participants don't want to. So having that conversation at the beginning of the project about what we think. So in this project, the mothers, when we talked about the theatre work, and I'm not talking about formal theatre, it was movement, sound, and I think we had to explain that we worked with community facilitators before we went to the participants, and the community members, we had a conversation with them, what would work for you and what do you think wouldn't work for us, and then we moved to stage through. I think the challenge is, if you presume things and you control things and think this is the way to do it, that's when you may find it's not as popular as you thought it would be.
Excellent recommendations. Thank you so much, Monica. There are some great questions rolling in the Q&A box, and please keep them coming. We may get some time for more questions at the end, and we will also be following up after the webinar. But for now, let's move to our next speaker, which is Dr. Laura Abbott, talking about using theatre to explore the experiences of pregnant women in prisons. And Laura is an associate professor at the University of Hertfordshire and a registered midwife. Laura co-authored the Birth Charter for Pregnant Women in England and Wales and has contributed to the review of Her Majesty's Prisons and Probation Services operational policy on pregnancy, mother and baby units and maternal separation in prison. And she's the lead on the ARC East of England supported Lost Mothers project. And that's funded by ESRC in partnership with the charity Birth Companions and the Lived Experience team. And she's going to tell us more about this project in this talk. So thank you, and over to you, Laura.
Lovely. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm delighted to be here today to talk a bit about our research looking at the experiences of pregnant women and mothers in prison and our Lost Mothers project, and how we really have used theatre to really bring to life our research. And I wanted to start with a little bit of context for you. So in the past year or so, there have been around 215 pregnant women in prison, and over a third of those women are on remand. And of those women, 51% who applied for a mother and baby unit were admitted, but the rest weren't. So what we wanted to look at was the experiences of those women who are separated from their babies, hence calling it the Lost Mothers Project. We've worked really closely with a lived experience team and birth companions on this. And one of the reasons that is so important that we look at women who are separated from their babies is the real risk to women's mental health. And we know that there was a really tragic case in 2015 where a woman died by suicide 5 days after she'd given birth to her third baby. And she had been told that she could no longer express breast milk for her baby, who was in special care, and she was no longer able to visit her baby. And there was a lot of important points that were flagged up from that. But one of the things was most important was about women's mental health. But we also know there's no data collected on mothers separated from babies after birth or on entering prison. And we know that there are community alternatives, but they're not used particularly well. So that gives you a little bit of context. But to tell you what we did is that this is a qualitative piece of research. As I've mentioned, we've co-produced our research with the charity Birth Companions, who are also ARC partners as well. And we co-designed all of our research with women with lived experience, and that includes from our logo to our title, Lost Mothers, and very much the phrase "nothing about us without us" really threaded through our whole research. We looked at we went into 5 prisons and we spoke to 74 people, and that included 29 women who had been separated from their babies, to hear of their experiences. And what we did is we analysed the research through thematic analysis, and we did this with our lived experience team as well, and a number of themes came out from our research, including, and not surprising, the pain that women would talking about the fact that it felt like as a baby was removed, that the baby was ripped from their arms, and it was just the most painful thing that women had ever experienced, worse than birth, some women told us. And we found that support was often inadequate, and we really wanted to recommend personalised structured care for these women. Understandably incredibly distressing, but also women often want to disappear back into the prison system. So I was saying about the distress that women experience, the grief and loss, the ambiguous loss that women experience as well. But something else we found was that the staff that were involved in the care of these women would often find it incredibly distressing. And we also found that staff told us that they had no training, that was from prison staff to midwives to social workers, in that particular area of separation of babies in the prison system. We found also that there was a lack of diversity on mother and baby boards, and that was something that was really important to highlight, and the fact that some of the decisions that were being made were made that weren't culturally sensitive as we would have liked. The reason why we wanted to use theatre to really highlight the issues with regards to pregnancy and new motherhood in prison is to bring to life our research. And we worked with a charity, a theatre company called Clean Break Theatre Company, who work specifically with members who may have lived experience of prison or may be at risk of entering the prison system. And we were able to join with them, and also a playwright called Gabrit Corbatti, who took our research and took our ideas and worked closely with the women with lived experience to write a play about our work. And here we hopefully will hear a little bit from the theatre company Clean Break.
I'm Anna Herman. I'm the Artistic Director of Clean Break, and I'm also the Director of Scenes from Lost Mothers by Gurpreet Kaur Bhatti. So Scenes from Lost Mothers is a short play that was commissioned by Clean Break and the University of Hertfordshire to kind of amplify the research of Dr. Laura Abbott that Laura has been doing for over 12 years, researching into the experience of incarcerated women being separated from their children, from their young children and their babies, and from around pregnancy in prisons.
Hi, I'm Neetu Singh, and I'm the Assistant Director on Scenes from Lost Mothers. It's a play that follows the experiences of mothers in prisons, their experiences of separation, their experiences of motherhood, of giving birth, their experiences with each other, the kind of camaraderie of women in prison, the sisterhood that they experience, the experience of professionals, of social workers, of prison officers. It's a really great show that manages to showcase the diversity of people's experiences in a short amount of time, that really affirms people's experiences, that really educates people's experiences. I've learned so much being in this room and being on this show already, so I'm excited for people to see it.
What would you like to put inside?
So there's a little bit about the theatre company Clean Break, and I'd like now to play one of the short scenes from the play that's been filmed especially.
People are staring. Not because they recognise me off EastEnders. They see the cuffs and they're frightened. I'm frightened too. What is this thing? This animal I've been made that requires a leash in the hospital around nurses and doctors. Kittens and puppies get 6 weeks with their mummies. My baby will get 3 days. When I had the first scan, one of the zookeepers said I was in for a special treat. Long cuffs. I didn't think they were supposed to use them, but he got them out anyway. Long cuffs. He said I could still move but not get away, like when I went to the toilet. He was the first man to see my baby on the monitor. I wanted my partner, but they sent the wrong appointment time. Computer error. When I was in labour, I kept asking them to call him, but the zookeepers said they needed authorisation. I asked and I asked, I started shouting. In the end, the doctor rang him. He got stuck in traffic. I wanted to breastfeed, but the zookeeper was watching over me, so I asked for a bottle. Afterwards, I walk out the hospital with 3 zookeepers and no cub. No cub. I catch sight of us all in a mirror. It's a picture of a moving cage. It's weird. People are staring. They can't stop. I don't blame them.
So from that small scene, you can see that the issues that have been brought up in recent days, recent weeks in the media have been about handcuffing women in labour and also in antenatal appointments, etc. And that's something that's been coming up. So this video has been used as a campaigning video as well. So we can really see the impact of how we can really help change happen from theatre and from art. And here's some examples of what we feel needs to change, and something that we're campaigning with other organisations is to have alternatives to imprisonment, increasing the use of community sentencing. And also thinking about the 1,001 days from conception to the age of 2 for a child, thinking about those important years and how we can use those as an impact assessment to inform sentencing and community orders. And having new policies to guide those police, prosecution and sentencers and probation services in those 1,001 days. And of course, to divert the funding from prison to community alternatives. And most importantly, really, is to improve the support for women at risk of separation or separated. And there are always going to be cases where we need to separate mothers and babies, but the support that's needed is really vital. And I think our research and through the arts and through theatre is really showing and bringing the public on board as well. And I think the importance of working with lived experiences, people with lived experiences, as threaded all the way through this piece of work. So that's a real whistle-stop tour. And the last slide is as a thank you slide, and it's a picture with us, with the cast, and with Gurpreet, who wrote the play, and it was performed for the public in the Embassy Theatre in North London, and completely sold out. So it shows that we really can make an impact on the public as well as professionals with our research. So I think I'm maybe a minute over. I can't see. I'm afraid.
Yes, that's okay. Thank you, Laura, so much. What an excellent presentation. Lots of positive comments in the chat, praising the work for both you and Monica so far. We'll just have one very quick question, but if just a brief answer, and then we'll move on. One of the questions is asking, how did you approach participants' emotional support in the research design and also later in the project? I think quite important given the emotive nature of this work.
I think that's a really very vital question, actually, and something that we thought of all the way through our research. We worked in a trauma-informed way. And we, all of us, myself and the research assistants involved in the project, undertook training on trauma-informed interview approaches. As a midwife working for many years in this area, I have quite a lot of experience, but I needed to make sure that our team was supported, and also with our lived experience team. And what we were able to do when we went into the prisons and women consented to be interviewed by us was to take a letter written by our lived experience team, thanking them for their input into the project. When we're doing research with anyone in prison, we're obviously not allowed to give a voucher or any rewards, but this was a way of thanking the women, and it was written directly from our lived experience team, a beautiful letter, and I can share if anyone would like that, which was very much appreciated. But it was also about checking in with the participants, and the women were very much wanting to share their experiences, and they wanted us to share it with everybody else as well, and sort of were kind of thankful that we were actually looking at this issue and wanting to share it. So it was trying to keep it succinct, but yes, in a nutshell, yes.
Yes, for such an important big topic, yeah. And it may be that we have a little bit of time to explore a couple of more questions at the end as well. But for now, I think we move on to our last speakers. We've got 2 speakers for this last presentation. So I'm delighted to introduce Barbara Chisnikovska and Liz Naylor, talking about using arts-based methods to explore the experiences and perceptions of pregnancy amongst Gypsy and traveller women. Barbara is Community Engagement Inclusion Manager at ARC East Midlands Centre for Ethnic Health Research at the University of Leicester, and has expertise within the field of public involvement, community engagement and health equity. And Liz Naylor is an award-winning artist based in Leicester, a painter, sculptor and poet, and has won several awards for her work focusing on oppression of women in marginalised groups. Over to you, Barbara and Liz. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us, and how can we follow up by such a great presentation. So this afternoon we're going to present, we do double act, so I will do a quick whistle stop about the background of the project, and Liz, my colleague, will be talking a little bit more about the creative process and some of the challenges we actually came undertaking this project. So our project will focus on maternal experience and expectation of Gypsy traveller women in a community based in our local area, Leicestershire. And part of the session will be looking actually how creative methodology can promote inclusion in research, but also the visual story and some of the elements we deploy in our research can promote work with underserved community. There will be a very short snapshot on insight from the maternity, because we want to focus on the artistic side of the project, but also Liz will highlight some of the key aspects, how art can be the bridge between communities and how we can overcome some of the challenges. So why we have decided to undertake work with Gypsy and Travellers community? I think there will be no surprise for many of you on the call this afternoon. You know, historically the community is very underserved, and I particularly don't like that word, but also, you know, face many systemic barriers and stigma. There's been a number of different reports, policy statements and different research highlighting the disadvantage the community face, both in terms of access to services, access to research, participation and so on. So that's just a snapshot of some of these reports. So in general, the community, if we looked at Gypsy and Traveller community, they, experience starking health inequalities. It's between 25 years difference between wide, general population in terms of life expectancy, but also because of some of the intersectional element in terms of, unemployment, low literacy level, low educational attainment, all these different intersection elements play a part in terms of their experience and the higher risk of developing number of conditions, including, long-term condition, disability, and particularly in focus for our project, it was around maternal inequalities and high level of mortality rate. So what we did, we conducted a qualitative study. So, but part of this was a big part was utilizing art methodology to explore the journey of pregnancy of women, and that journey actually spanned from across, the initial conception to postnatal care. Particularly for us, what was important, it was looking at the impact on influence of ethnicity and culture and the journey and experience of accessing care and interaction with healthcare professionals. Big part of the work was around peer-led creative workshop, and Liz will be expanding on that element of the discussion, and sort of accumulation of that project was a community-based collaborative exhibition, and we are pleased to say the exhibition has been shown, later on and continue to be shown. We conducted the focus groups with Gypsy and Traveller women, but we also focus on some sort of reflection from healthcare professionals, and that included semi-structured interviews with midwife. As I mentioned before, we looked at the sort of co-production element of creating the workshop, which Liz is going to focus on. But in addition to this, I think to complement the work, we want to look at a little bit more global picture and conducted the systematic review. And if people are interested, they can sort of look at the paper published. So the next section of the presentation is really to reflect on some of the artistic vision and some of the outputs we created, and I will invite my colleague Liz to take over.
Thank you. I was asked to present at this conference to give my thoughts and reflections as an artist with regard to the importance of visual storytelling and how I implemented it. In the first instance, we held a number of focus groups with the same group of women discussing their experience of maternity and the NHS. I was tasked with documenting their journey through visual storytelling, a medium accessible to their community and non-Gypsy traveller audiences. Through talking of their shared experiences, we were able to capture traditions, family life, spiritual beliefs, rural landscapes, and travellers' lifestyles, all of which are central to their identity. A snapshot of their lived experiences, a cultural archive, certainly a medium for discussion and debate rather than judgment, as this conference proves. Visual storytelling holds significant importance, particularly in these communities with strong oral traditions, providing a powerful and accessible way to share culture, memory, and identity. It can bridge barriers such as lack of education, evidenced in our first meeting with the group, as the majority of the women attending were illiterate. Art portrayed in this way, created in collaboration with community members, offers authentic representation. It was inclusive and democratic, a simple medium to express stories, values, and emotions, particularly those which are often difficult to express, such as loss, trauma, joy, strength, and hope, for these women in particular. It allowed them to take control of their own narrative, which was empowering and important to them. They signed off each poster in the conceptual stages and had a final say in the finished project. In summary, visual storytelling is a bridge between tradition and modernity, between having a voice and silence, between marginalisation and recognition. It offers an accessible means to honour the past, reflect the present, and imagine the future. Here I did it with boldness, colour, and authenticity. That's why I developed the project in that way. Now I'm going to honestly tell you some of my challenges and thinking. As stated previously, visual storytelling is vital to the community. Many of the Gypsy traveller women are non-literate. Powerful imagery provides an accessible and inclusive way to share their voices, experiences, and identity. I attended community meetings with the women where they spoke openly about their experiences. In my previous career, I trained as a life coach and worked at a senior level in HR and recruitment before retraining as an artist. My life coaching skills have proved invaluable in these projects, in the projects that I work with marginalised groups, in building trust and confidence. These skills enable the participants to share deeply and ensure their experiences are represented with authenticity and respect. At the start, I faced some real personal challenges. I had my own fears and doubts, questioning whether I could do this. Would I be safe? Worrying if they would like me. But curiosity got the better of me, and the opportunity to learn about their lives and experiences was a tremendous pull. To be allowed access was an honour. I had to confront my own unconscious prejudices. I knew that to do justice to their stories, I had to put all of that aside. I had to be fully present, professional, and open, to listen without judgment and ensure that my own views didn't shape or distort the work. It was about giving them space, not taking it. That mindset shift was essential for the integrity of the project. During the conversations, some of the women asked me very direct and personal questions about my own experiences and perceptions of the Gypsy and traveller community, which took me by surprise. I knew in those moments that gaining their respect meant being honest, but also sensitive. I couldn't pretend to know their lives, but I could be open about my learning journey, acknowledge my past assumptions, and show that I was there with genuine curiosity and care. That honesty helped build a bridge between us. It showed that I wasn't there to judge or to speak for them, but to listen and understand. Working with these women was a deeply moving experience. They were warm, honest, and open, often loud, bold, and colourful, with a great sense of humour and zest for life. Behind that strength were real stories of hardship and tragedy. the loss of children, poor maternity care, lack of respect from wider society and institutions. Many had experienced premature births and low birth weight babies, which they saw as a positive. Surprisingly, they don't or won't breastfeed, something that really struck me. What stood out as a success story was past paternity care provided directly with Gypsy and Traveller women themselves trained to support others. This cultural intermediary made all the difference, a bridge between two worlds that often misunderstood each other. I think without this, the NHS will struggle. I came away believing that their stories and hopes needed to be expressed visually in ways that reflected their lives and could speak directly to them. My biggest challenge was creating artwork that could connect with both audiences, a largely non-literate community and a professional, often academic audience. It required balance, staying true to the women's voices and experiences. I chose to go back to basics, to create a simplistic visual image using bright colours and their words. I created 6 poster-style montages which reflected our conversations. I searched and found common ground through empathy, respect, and creative integrity. So, quick reflections. A collaborative approach produced an authentic representation of their lived experiences, and the visual narrative provided a vehicle to bridge the gap between the community and healthcare professionals. We built trust, we demonstrated the challenges they were faced with, we revealed deep-seated issues, and we highlighted the need for culturally sensitive care. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm just mindful of the time, and I think Liz already mentioned some of the reflection from the project. But actually, we find that utilizing this method, it was really impactful in terms of not just creating the outputs, but actually how the journey continues and how the community itself utilizing some of this in terms of empowerment, knowledge, and sharing with the community members. But most importantly, I think for us, it was around the continuation of that building trust between the research community and the members of the group we work with. And just to acknowledge the research team, and this work would not be possible with a community organization we work with, Gate Leicestershire. So they are the driving force in the engagement and participation in research. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thanks so much, Barbara and Liz, for such an engaging presentation. And Liz, I was delighted as well to hear you talk about your reflections as an artist. We have been getting questions in the Q&A box about that, about the sort of background of artists and what they bring to the role. And I think that's gone some way to addressing some of that in talking about your experience of coaching. There's also a nice question from Aisha Valenzuela in the chat, who asks, who says, Barbara and Liz, this was a very interesting project. I also work with Gypsy Roma Traveller communities. I was wondering how you approach talking about what might be taboo topics in the community in a culturally appropriate way, or what elements of their culture did you take under consideration for the process of shaping the project? I mean, I think you've reflected some of that in your talk, but if you'd like to add anything in response to that.
I may start, and please feel free to jump in. I think one of the advantages we had, particularly myself, I've worked with the community for over 10 years, so you can imagine, the knowledge and the cultural competence of some of the topic was already in existence. But one thing I would probably stress here is about the interaction and the pre-engagement preparation work you've got, what we have with the community organization we work with. So in terms of, highlighting some of the taboo, or maybe how we express some of the question, because obviously, the artistic side is one thing, but we actually had to conduct, focus groups and ask some challenging question. And I think some of this was led by the community advocates, and they were really signposting us in terms of how we navigate the space and being mindful. And I have to say that the group we work with, the women we engage in the project, they were very open and honest about their reflection, and they also acknowledge, there's still a lots of taboo, but as Liz mentioned, some of the things we thought were quite striking in terms of inequalities, they were quite normal. So again, the cultural context, it is really important. What we might see as inequalities, they perceive quite as a normal cultural practice of what happens on a daily basis. I don't know, Liz, if you want to add anything else.
Apologies about the dogs. I think I just found that we the chemistry was really good between us all. We built up a really good rapport, and they were very, very open with us, and you know, it was quite amusing at times. And so they had a really good sense of humor about stuff. And you know, I think the important thing is we built up their trust. And I know Barbara's worked with them for quite a long time, so I was new, but I had to prove myself. So when I first went in there, I was asked some really, really difficult questions, and by one of the elder ladies who was testing me and seeing what I was made of, really. So I obviously answered the right questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Liz. And the time has really zoomed by. So I think at this point, it's time for me to really thank all of our speakers today. We've had 3 excellent presentations, and thank you all for raising some excellent questions as well. There's been a few questions around the relationships between researchers and artists, and I think, you know, your presentation at the end has really tapped into that. There's a question here actually addressed to Monica, and what you found to be the benefits of having academic arts researchers as co-investigators.
Yes, so where possible now, we do have co-Is who are arts, creative artists. In the past, we didn't, and it was more often commissioned later on in the project because it was more advocacy work. We've turned that around now, so we do have the embedded researchers, artists as partners. They may not be the ones who definitely do all of the work later on, because part of co-creation is sometimes you don't know what you're going to do till you actually halfway through the project. But what it does mean is that just as you might have an architect working you, or from you know, or a nutritionist working with you, actually they are also giving their expertise, and it also means that they know what the project is about and they're embedded in it, invested in it. You learn each other's language. It's true interdisciplinary work from the outset. That's worked much better for us, and then they also can be the facilitator to the other artists that you might want to bring in.
Excellent. I don't know if any of the other speakers want to comment on anything around those relationships, new relationships for this type of work. A few artists also asking for tips on, you know, doing this kind of work in partnership with researchers. So, Laura, I don't know if anything you want to add on that front.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really quite exciting and interesting way to work. And I mean, I feel as a researcher, I've learned so much, and it also helps you get very much in touch with your own data, actually, because it's being interpreted in a very different way. So Gurpreet, who wrote the play Scenes from Lost Mothers, she, right from the outset, she said, please trust me with the work, and it's quite nerve-wracking to be able to do that in the beginning, but you know, we were able to trust her, and she sort of threaded it all together to make a story, really, and also thinking about next steps, and we're hoping to have it adapted for film, so that we can bring it to even wider audiences. But I think, you know, it's a really, you know, lovely way to work together, and seeing the other speakers as well and how they're working in this creative way, it just brings the research to life. And it's just a different way of being able to engage and bring our work to a wider audience, really. So I'd highly recommend it.
Lots of opportunities, no doubt, going forward. So thank you once again to all of our speakers. I think all of the presentations have been excellent in highlighting examples where creative arts can be particularly helpful for reaching underserved, marginalised communities in ways that engage those who've experienced trauma. We've seen that in those examples where it can act as a bridge to wider audiences for dissemination and impact in bringing those experiences to life, as Laura just said. And I think, you know, these approaches can definitely be important for conveying complex experiences and facilitating empathy, engaging with those communities, as reflected throughout these three presentations. And I think something for us, especially for our research going forward within the applied research collaborations, where I think there'll certainly be much more opportunity for this kind of work, and with a particular focus on addressing health and care inequalities as well. So I found these talks today very inspiring. I know others have, because we've had lots of comments. So just to feed that back to speakers, many people saying in the Q&A chat that these have been amazing presentations, really valuable. People have been very grateful for you sharing some of your insights from the great examples of work that you've done. I'm sure we'll have many more examples in the future. So please join us for the next ARC webinar in this series, if you're able to, which will focus on creative arts in relation to dementia. And this takes place on 9th of July, and there'll be a link there in the chat for that. We will also be in touch following up from this webinar with various links to resources connected to these projects. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today, and have a very enjoyable afternoon. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.